Hello. Today, I just wanted to present what I feel is a very interesting discussion. I know it's something that I had looked into myself in detail based on the issue that I had, and therefore I think it is of extreme relevance to a lot of people who may be going through the same problems that I went through, and that is a misdiagnosis of gout while on the carnivore diet, which can be very frustrating and obviously troubling, especially when someone has made such good progress on carnivore and suddenly you get this crazy symptom and you feel that everything that you've done is now irrelevant and not appropriate, and maybe you were wrong in your thinking, whereas in reality you were correct. So let me give you a little bit of the back history in my particular case. Basically, I went through a period where I was playing around with carnivore. I always treat myself as an experiment in the making. I was playing around with actually fasting and how little protein I could eat per day, which in retrospect was probably a foolish ad- idea and agenda. I was actually trying to get the ultimate six pack. And over a period of a few months, actually, it was quite impressive how much weight, etc., I could lose. And I actually lost about 40 pounds, which is kind of crazy since I wasn't overweight really to begin with. Um, but the problem is, I think I was actually undernourishing myself, which is one of the dangers of carnivore, is that it's very easy to undereat. That's another lesson that I've learned in this particular phase of my evolution into the carnivore lifestyle. And it also affects your immunity. I ended up getting COVID at the end of that, probably because I was hypoimmune based on undereating, bordering on malnutrition and kwashiorkor in retrospect, which is kind of scary. And I can laugh and smile about it now. But I ended up with a bad case of COVID that actually knocked me out for about 4 to 5 weeks minimum. I really bad, couldn't move, all the symptoms: headache, running nose, sore throat, uh, bronchitis, then eventually pain to touch of any of my muscles, couldn't even lie in the bed, uh, really bad symptoms. Finally, after about 4 to 5 weeks, I realized that maybe it had something to do with undereating. So I started upping my carnivore intake and started getting better. But even before that, actually, I got the weirdest symptom, which is the symptom of gout, which is not it was not really gout. It was actually not on the big toe, which is the proximal phalanx. It was actually on the third toe, which is very unusual for gout, actually. So just be aware of that as well. Um, and I was like, wow, how am I getting gout? Um, and it was extremely painful. The typical symptoms of swollen, very red, painful toe that couldn't even touch the sheet when you're lying in bed. So try to see a physician. Ended up going into an emergency care facility and ended up with a physician's assistant a couple of times. they don't even make a real diagnosis, to be honest. They just automatically see the symptoms and make it as gout without really knowing what it is. And they started putting me on all the gout treatments, which are horrendous, to be honest, in terms of the effects that they have on you, especially as a carnivore, where you are very aware of your body and the effects that these drugs that they are giving you actually have. It's kind of scary, actually. They put me on indomethacin, uh, Indocid, which is an anti-inflammatory, but actually has damaging effects on the kidney. Just so you know, I did not respond well to it. I did not. I could feel that I didn't feel right on it. Then they try to put me on colchicine, which is a typical anti-inflammatory that's supposed to dissolve the urate crystal in a gout attack. But because in retrospect, because I didn't have gout, it had absolutely zero effect on the swelling and inflammation of the toe. But I got all the side effects of colchicine, which are horrendous. I think it actually causes kidney damage, from what I've read. Um, but in terms of my actual way I felt while on the drug, absolutely zero energy. I could hardly move. I laid in bed. I could think normally, but every muscle in my body felt extremely weak. That is a colchicine side effect. That substance, in my mind, is highly dangerous, and I recommend people avoid it as much as possible. Obviously, if you have a real gout attack, it may help, and I know people who have gout who are not carnivore, and it seems to help them. But in my case, it definitely was, I think, a harmful way for me to go. Um, I went to the first physician, real physician. They had no idea what's going on. Once again, assumed it was gout. I did a couple of uric acid levels. One it was normal, one it was slightly higher, then it was normal. Your urate will go up and down all the time, varies from day to day, based on a whole conglomeration of factors. And it's possible to state just because you've got a high urate that you have gout. I mean, there seems to be very little correlation between the two, especially in my circumstance. And I was kind of convinced, based on my own history, because I am very familiar with oxalates and oxalate dumping, and I am quite notably an oxalate dumper. For example, you can see here on my skin, these are examples of oxalate dumping. You know, these little things that come out, you scratch them and you feel the little crystals of oxalate. You know, here's some more over here. So I'm very familiar. I had that. I noticed that I had that going down the front of my leg, and oxalates, as I know, are something that seems to attract to areas of high blood flow. So, for example, I know that as a tennis player, I move a lot on my shins and stuff like that. I could see there was a path of skin oxalate dumping on the front of the shin, um, actually leading right toward the middle toe. So obviously the blood flow was going in that area toward the middle toe. You could see the oxalates coming out on the skin. And then I figured probably there are oxalates in the joint, and that's what's actually causing the gout. Um, and so when I presented this theory to the traditional medical establishment, they obviously had zero idea what I was talking about. Um, they just kept trying to force a square peg into a round hole, saying that this was gout. There was absolutely zero evidence for gout other than the symptomatology, which is not a diagnosis. It's just a symptom of a crystal or something that's it's causing some inflammation and swelling of the particular joint. Could be a urate crystal, could be a calcium oxalate crystal, could be any crystal theoretically, but it's not a diagnosis for gout. So eventually, what I suggested to the first physician who was trying to send me to a podiatrist, I said, I tell you what, why don't you send me to a rheumatologist since they are supposed to be joint specialists, and let's see what he says. So she referred me to this guy. Once again, he was coming up with the diagnosis of gout, and I said, look, I do not think this is gout. My uric acid is going up and down. There's no evidence of this. Is there any way we can definitively determine if or if not this is gout? And it's only because I was so insistent that this rheumatologist, who actually happened to be a smart guy and had a solution for this, suggested that I go for what's known as a dual energy CT scan. And what this actually is it's a CT scan of the foot, or it could be of any part of the body, obviously, um, and it will actually refract the light in a certain way depending on what kind of crystal is in the joint. So if it is a urate crystal, it refracts in a certain way that shows the urate as a purple color on the CT scan, and it's a positive diagnosis for gout or lack of. Well, anyway, to make a long story incredibly short, I went for the dual um, energy CT scan, and there was no gout, zero. There was, according to the radiologist's findings, there's zero evidence. The number of urate crystals equals zero. Basically, there's zero evidence of urate in this joint. There was no gout. Went back to the rheumatologist. I explained to him again my original theory of calcium oxalate. He was like confused, never heard of this before. He entertained it though at this point and said, "Yeah, maybe it could be." And we did notice even on the bone there is some kind of crystal formation, but the dual energy CT scan doesn't notify you what the crystal is. It only turns purple if it's urate. If it's something else, they don't know what it is. Um, my suspicion, and based on the way I've managed this situation, it seems to be calcium oxalate crystal that was causing the symptomatology. I went on all the typical calcium oxalate management protocols that I use, and the gout has since disappeared and never returned. So I think that's an important lesson, even from a traditional medical point of view. First of all, don't treat something if you don't know what the diagnosis is. And just because you think it's something doesn't mean it is. I mean, I think it's a very dangerous practice that a lot of physicians have where they just treat something without really knowing what it is, without having an actual diagnosis, just based on symptomatology. I mean, that may work occasionally, and maybe, I don't know. I just really feel that medicine should be making diagnoses first before treating in most of the cases, if that's possible. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this case study and presentation. I thought it's important to put it out there. Hopefully, it'll be seen by some people and it'll help someone. If anyone has any questions, please reach out to me on info@carnivorenews.com. Sorry, info@carnivore.news, not carnivore.com. Info@carnivore.news. And thanks again once for listening. If there's anything else or any other topics you'd like me to cover, please send me an email as well. And if anyone's interested in these kind of forums, let me know as well. Thanks for again for listening and hope this was useful. Take care. Bye.